when you look a bit more closer to what we do, trade and trade finance, so you have still today, that's kind of a more or less typical trade transaction and trade finance transaction. You have shippers, companies, customs, and you have a lot of banks involved, insurance companies, and so on. And at the moment, often what happens is that they all use paper documents. So in a typical transaction, you have up to 100 different documents that go back and forth from various parties. So like the bank, for example, at the moment they have like 7 days to receive and check a document and then send it per courier to the next party. And for example, you can only collect a certain good from the port with a specific document. And then sometimes you need hundreds of other different other documents like certificate of origins and so on. And so the idea is that many of these documents they go more and more digital. And the idea is really by using a blockchain rather than having this back and forth of different documents, you have like smart contracts that define when something happens immediately when something else happened. For example, when the I don't know, the container entered in a certain port, a document or like a confirmation would immediately be sent to the person or company that is allowed to collect the goods, and the payment would be triggered immediately. For example, we have with our friends at the Commercial Crime Center in London, we discussed a tool that, for example, there's a lot of sanctions in trade, and sometimes when you export, well, it happens often that when a ship leaves China, for example, they're not allowed to stop in Iran, but sometimes it happens that they stop in Iran. And so like immediately when a container would stop in Iran, kind of an alert would be signaled to all kind of involved parties. And for example, if a container is entering the port of Iran, a bank, for example, would not be, well, there's some kind of exemption of payment that they're allowed to do. Just like long story short, it would fasten the whole process and make it really much more transparent and easier.
It would be Big Brother is watching all the ships.
That's of course one of the other questions, that if you want this, that you have this system in place. Yeah, that's kind of transparency has not just advantages, that's for sure. Yeah, we recently released a report where we tried to list all kind of the projects that happen in trade, and that's really just a small selection. You have like, actually you have way more, but those are the more advanced, more like on the supply chain, but also on the trade and the financing side. You have a lot of companies, banks that they group themselves together in consortia to build up specific blockchain platforms. And the one in the middle, the one with the red circle around it, it's this DSI project that we are about to launch in Singapore. The idea is really that each of these platforms, they are defining at the moment their own rules, their own governance, and so on. And the problem is you need to always subscribe to this set of rules. You need to be a member of this blockchain platform. But maybe if your bank or your company that you want to transact is member of another platform, you need to subscribe to those rules again. So the idea of this digital trade standards initiative in Singapore is basically that you create some kind of common rule books, some kind of ways to, we call it interoperability or interconnectivity between these blockchain platforms. So maybe, we don't know, maybe at one point in time there is merger between those platforms, but at least for now you still have more the trend that there's more and more different platforms. Yeah.
But doesn't mean that so different platforms they are connected or not at all?
So at the moment that's one of the problems, they're not connected. So it's a bit like you have a Gmail email address, but you would not be able to send an email to someone who is on Hotmail or whatever. And the aim of this DSI is really to kind of reduce these barriers between the blockchain platforms.
But they all have a different regulation. They can establish different rules.
Yeah, at the moment they all kind of
And
establish.
there's no one that's like has a visibility of all the rules in the
No, no.
And I have a question regarding for example, the discussions that now the banks have around this. For example, in the banking commission meetings, when they discuss, I don't know, they have a topic around blockchain. What are like the main concerns, or how are they trying to keep up? Like, is that the kind of discussions that they're having?
So this kind of interconnectivity is really a big discussion because they invest a lot of money, but they don't really know in which platform they should invest the money. So they don't want to just, I don't know, you have one, it's called WeTrade. They're a bit afraid when we put all the money in WeTrade, and WeTrade will maybe not the player that will succeed, and well, then.
But basically, then the banks are just trying to integrate these platforms as an investor, not to be left out, or to develop their own, or.
Well, you have to understand that, like, when a bank cannot really do this on their own unless they want to just transact with their own subsidiaries. But if they often, like in a trade transaction, you have more than one banks involved. So they have to agree which platform they would use. And often they, like the large banks, they would maybe use 5, 6 different platforms at the moment, but it's quite costly.
So would it be possible, given the current state of play, that everybody, all banks could use one platform? Is that technically feasible?
Yeah, and I think sure, but I'm not quite sure if they're willing to do it. Again, it's sometimes political, because kind of the company who owns the platform can also define the rules. Sometimes you have, well, you have this trade war at the moment between US and China, and so maybe US banks rather insist on that platform and Chinese on another platform, just like one example. So yes, but I know, for example, this trade trust or trade flow that ICC is involved in, it's a Singapore platform. Again, I mean, it's just one out of many. But the idea is at the moment really that with the standards that we create, we reduce at least a bit the distance between these platforms.
No, I'm just wondering, in a theory world, you could do this, but is the system or the world equipped with the computing power and the data necessary to be really able to use such a system at scale that would involve everybody?
I don't know. Well,
So there's, absolutely you could, but most things nowadays have to be off-chain or side-chain. So really it's about layers. So if you think about, say, Ethereum or 3, which is or IBM's Hyperledger, that's all a base layer, it's like the internet, but everything on top of, so all of the projects are, say, apps on top of the internet. So these are apps on top of the blockchain. And yes, you could absolutely connect all of the base layers of the blockchain, but no, we would not have the computing power. It would be too, depending on how much data you needed to put on the blockchain, it would not be possible. I think in the future there needs to be, so my main issue with blockchain in general is as you were talking about, permission versus permissionless. A permissioned blockchain, a private blockchain, is a complete paradox, because how can you have trust and how can there be transparency if everybody in the same company is the one who owns the nodes? So this is where we need to find a balance. You need to find a balance of transparency and a balance of sharing data, because you can't share all the data. You have to have it public enough, transparent enough, and decentralized enough that you could trust that each bit of data that you want to use is trustworthy. So this is it's a balance.
I don't know if this was your last slide, but I don't know if there's anyone from IT in the room, but I don't remember who from IT here who told me that actually all this generates so much power, like one digit that you need to transform, that like all the matrix and all the servers around the world that needs to process. I'm totally not technical, and that it costs so much energy that it's actually not at all sustainable or green. It's the opposite.
Yes and no. It's often referred to Bitcoin. This Bitcoin mining, they need a lot of computer power to do this mining, and I somewhere read that kind of it's the equivalent of the electricity of 1 year in Nigeria or something. But it really depends a bit, as you say, like the architecture, like in a more private blockchain, it's not that it would be so energy inefficient as blockchain, Bitcoin.
That too, and you have to also think about not just the energy that is generated by this, but also the energy that is saved. So you're not getting into your car to go to the bank, and the banker is not getting into his car to go
or
to
the
the bank.
paper
Or the paper, all that, right? So there is an offset there as well, and then there's obviously any efforts that are made by companies, that manage huge data centers. The cloud is at one point physical in some place. Their efforts to do that in a carbon neutral or even in a carbon minus way, because there are some efforts to do that as well.
Okay, I think I'm always at the end. Well, this is another ICC project. It's kind of a online discussion forum where we invite primarily public organizations and international organizations to discuss a bit what works well in blockchain, really trade related, blockchain in trade, what does work not so well, and what are points that maybe the international community should address, and also what ICC could do to make it work better. You have like, that's really just a rough list of various blockchain in trade applications and platforms. So almost every country or trading countries is trying out a few